Good evening, everyone who is joining or watching this video after it's been recorded. Welcome to History Raw, another Friday night edition. And today is an Eerie, Oklahoma episode, Friday, April 14th, 2023. And it wasn't until I really looked at the date there and thought, yeah, this is the right topic to do today because April 14th is the day that President Lincoln was assassinated on Good Friday in 1865. So it's been 158 years ago today. And I put a little teaser in a video I shared a couple of days ago that tonight's episode had to do with John Wilkes Booth, the assassin of President Lincoln. Again, welcome and glad you're here. So this is an Eerie, Oklahoma episode, and I hope your curiosity is piqued because you might be thinking, okay, John Wilkes Booth died 12 days after Lincoln's assassination in Virginia. This is Oklahoma. What is that? How are they connected and how is that eerie? I'm glad you're asking that question or thinking that question. So let me go back to my slide presentation here. This is going to be a short video. I will link two videos in the comments section. One is a little 3-minute video, but I highly recommend the 33-minute video because it's going to cover the topic that I'm going to tell you about right now, and it's going to tell it to you in a much thorough way. So for tonight's episode, we're going to Enid, Oklahoma. For the majority of for my Facebook friends or for you members on this History Raw page who are not from Oklahoma, or you're not from central or western Oklahoma, Enid is kind of in the, I would say, central, personally, being from central Oklahoma. But I know all of my friends from southeast Oklahoma, everything this way is west. So anyway, we're going to say that Enid is in the north central / west part of the state. And when I think of Enid, I think of the large grain elevators located there. And if my memory serves me correctly, at one time, Enid had the largest capacity for grain of any place on the planet. Those of you who know about this for sure on this history group, let me know if I'm incorrect about that. But I think of I think of the grain elevators when I think of Enid. I think of Vance Air Force Base. And as a Southern Baptist from Oklahoma, I think of a fellow Southern Baptist pastor who was from Enid, who became a seminary professor and author by the name of Calvin Miller. And I really enjoy his books. But anyway, we're going to Enid, and we're going to talk about the death of a man by the name of David E. George. David E. George died on January 13th, 1903, in Enid, Oklahoma, at an old hotel called the Grand Hotel. Mr. George committed suicide in room number 4 at the Grand Hotel in Enid by drinking poison or drinking arsenic. Once they found him, he was taken to the funeral home, which was also a part, which was in a building that was also part furniture store. And Mr. George was embalmed, and then he was put on display so that as you walked by the furniture store, you could see him, and this is him embalmed. You could see him sitting there through the furniture store window. Why, you might be asking? Would they embalm a 64-year-old man who killed himself in Enid, Oklahoma? I'm glad you asked again. Let's continue. Some 20-something years before Mr. George died, he was living in Texas. He was going by the name of John St. Helen. During that time, he became sick and he thought he was going to die. So he called his then lawyer in, a man by the name of Finis Bates, and he confessed to Mr. Bates in Texas. This would have been in the 1880s. I am the man who killed Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Bates wrote that down. He had plans of reporting him to the government. But lo and behold, Mr. St. Helen recovered. He didn't die. And as soon as he got well, he left Texas. Nine months before David George died in January of 1903, a man by the name of David Elihu George, sorry, getting ahead of myself, David Elihu George, which is the same name, except now we know what E stands for. David Elihu George was in El Reno, Oklahoma. He was on basically what we would call today hospice care. And he told a minister's wife who was attending to him, I am John Wilkes Booth. Ended up leaving El Reno, ended up in Enid, and then killed himself 9 months later. The minister's wife read about this in the newspaper. And the description sounded just like the patient that she had 9 months earlier. So she sent her husband, a Methodist minister, up to Enid. This was about 2 days after Mr. George died. And when he saw the body, he immediately said, "That is not David E. George, that is John Wilkes Booth." And that is why the funeral home / furniture store displayed his body in the window. And it was advertised in the Enid newspaper. And it got out. And remember the lawyer from Texas, Finis Bates? He had been trying to find John St. Helen for 20-something years. When he read this article, he went to Enid, Oklahoma, and he said, "That's my friend, my client, John St. Helen." And Finis Bates purchased the body the embalmed body of David E. George. And from that point on, this is the eerie part. From that point on, the corpse, the embalmed body of David E. George, slash potentially or possibly John Wilkes Booth, traveled around in freak shows, in circuses, and was viewed by many, many people for 5 or 10 cents as the body of John Wilkes Booth. This went on up into the 50s and 60s, even as the body was slowly deteriorating. And since the 1970s, there's really, we don't know what happened to it. It's thought that the body is in a private collection. That just sounds kind of weird, doesn't it? Somebody having a private collection of embalmed bodies. But there's a video that I have yet to watch that I plan on watching very soon that purports to know where the body is. If it's something of significance, I will share it to the post. But anyway, wrapping this up, let me just show you a couple pictures here. Let me make them a little bigger for you. So here is a picture of John St. Helen. And then John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth would have, according to the official narrative, died in 65. He was born in 38. So he was about 26 or 27 years old. John St. Helen, not sure when this picture was taken, but in the 1880s, when he would have confessed, would have probably been in his 40s. So notice here, notice the triangular part, the natural part there on both men's faces, the kind of the natural wave there of that part. And then the mustache is thicker here, but you can see it being kind of worn in the same type of fashion. Now let me show you an up-close picture of David E. George's face. This is 2 days after he died. Now his face is still the official, this picture, actually I cropped it. Underneath it, it said his body after 2 days, after he died, and his face was still swollen from the poison. But you can see, again, that natural triangular formation because of the part, the hair being combed this way, the wave coming down and then back up. Again, that mustache style. I'm not going to get into what the videos talk about because I want you to watch that. I just do want you to know, though, that there was talk that the government did not give a lot of details about Booth's death when it first happened. Apparently, and again, I say apparently, there were those who looked at the body at the time and said, that's not John Wilkes Booth. And then there are those who say that John Wilkes Booth's mother saw the body and identified him. So you really need to watch the 33-minute video. It's a good video. It was, I think it was a project of a student for her history class. And so it's really interesting. One of the three persons that, well, I'll just tell you, one person who shares in it is the owner of the furniture store. in Enid. The furniture store is still there, and it's the guy who owns it now. His family had it in 1903. Obviously, he believes the story. The second person is a pastor in Enid, a fellow Southern Baptist pastor. Excuse me. This is not Calvin Miller, but this is a pastor who lives in Enid today, and he's a well-known pastor in Southern Baptist circles, and he's also kind of a armchair historian, and his name is Wade Burleson. And then the third person is a actual history teacher who has studied Lincoln in depth. So I think you'll find it interesting. I wanted to share with you some of the more weightier books that if you're interested in this kind of stuff, like I like to read about the Kennedy assassination. I like to read about Brushy Bill Roberts, who came out in 1950 and said he was Billy the Kid. And so this also interests me. If you want to read some of the weightier historical things about it, these 4 books here all scored around 4.5 stars out of 5 on Amazon. Manhunt and Chasing Lincoln's Killer by James Swanson. Both of them had a 4.5 rating. American Brutus by Michael Kaufman. I don't remember exactly what it was, 4344. Blood on the Moon, The Assassination of Abraham Lincoln by Edward Steers. And up here, this is always a good thing, I think. It's got a little endorsement by a Civil War historian named James McPherson. So if you wanted to do some summer reading about the Lincoln assassination and the Booth story, as this is called, when we talk about David E. George being John Wilkes Booth, it's referred to as the Booth story. These might be some good places to start. Now, remember I mentioned the lawyer Finis Bates. Finis Bates, after he got the body, he wrote a book in 1907 about it. And I forgot to look to see if I could find that on Amazon, but I will, if I find it, well, I will definitely put the name of the book in the comments. If I find a link to it, I'll share that too. I would imagine it's pretty expensive. I'll see if maybe there's a free Google copy, PDF. But what's intriguing is apparently in 1907, the U.S. government had still not released all of the information about Booth's death. And Finis Bates wrote things about Booth's personal items that they found in the Garrett barn. And nobody should have known this because the government hadn't released it yet. So that's a pretty intriguing thing. Anyway, a couple of more books. If you don't want to get into, because books by historians can be pretty dense. So if you want a more popular historical account, Bill O'Reilly, who used to be on Fox News with the O'Reilly Factor, you know, he's been writing a lot of books the last 10, 15 years. Ironically, it's called the Killing Series because it's about people who were killed, killing Lincoln, killing Kennedy, killing Reagan. So, and there's a lot more, killing Jesus. But if you want a more popular account, but I think, you know, O'Reilly didn't write it all by himself. Martin Dugard helped him, and I can't remember if Dugard was a historian or an editor, but it's pretty, it's written more for the layman. Now, this book here is what I'm most interested in, and I have a copy, and I started reading it a few years ago, but stopped, but I'm going to try to do it this summer. President Lincoln Assassinated. See my copy there, proud of that. This is a book that is put out by the Library of America, which is a pretty prestigious publishing company. What this book contains, this is not a book written by a historian. This is a book that simply contains all of the primary documents and primary testimonies to the murder, manhunt, trial, and mourning of President Lincoln. In other words, this book contains newspaper articles, court testimony, and things like that. And so it's compiled by Harold Holzer. It doesn't have a historian's written interpretation in it. It's just straight primary firsthand accounts. So for the serious reader, you'll want to get that book. Now, some of my friends on this in this group are history teachers, and if any of you guys have read any of these books, let us know in the comments and tell us what you think. But anyway, that's it. Eerie, Oklahoma tonight. Something related to President Lincoln. Did his assassin escape that barn in 1865 and come out to the West and live out his remaining years and die in Enid, Oklahoma, where his body, or the body of George Burns, not Burns, George, just went blank, David George. Sorry about that. Bethany got to meet one of her state representatives a couple of weeks ago at the Capitol, and his name is George Burns, ironically. But this body of David George in Enid, the eerie part was it became a carnival attraction. And that has turned serious historians off from pursuing this story. So anyway, watch the 33-minute video. And the 3-minute video is simply a video by the furniture owner, and it shows you the actual building and things like that. But anyway, I will put those 2 videos in the comments. I will put a link up to Pastor Burleson's blog entry, or his blog article on this. And let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you've been to Enid and you've visited the furniture store and seen the site. Let me know if this is absolutely new to you. I like to hear from you all. So anyway, have a great evening. And 158 years ago, President Lincoln was assassinated on Good Friday. But even though he was assassinated, our country was saved and came back together, and we can do things like this. We can make videos and watch videos and enjoy these types of things. So anyway, have a great evening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.